All right, well, you guys are singing pretty well. I like it. Nice. Who is into maybe those two new songs? Maybe I kind of get into it eventually. All right, thanks. Awesome. Well, hey, so we are in our last week of Savage Jesus. Who's been enjoying the series so far? Yeah, I hope it's been impacting you a little bit. One of the things I wanted to mention to you is we actually have been recording all the sermons. So if you missed one, I would definitely check it out. They're on YouTube. You can just listen to them. They're 20 minutes long, so they're pretty short. You can listen to it before school or after school when you have a downtime. But check them out because I think the topics have been pretty impactful. Now, I talked about this at the beginning of the series, but there's two reasons I picked this series. The first one is this, Savage Jesus. Well, Jesus actually is savage. He is somebody who doesn't care about the consequences of what he does. He is somebody who is willing to do whatever it takes to be respected. And secondly, the other reason I really, really like this topic or this series title is Savage and Jesus in a church, right? I've said this a couple times, but savage and Jesus in a church, they don't seem to fit. But what I want is our language here in the church to be the same as it is when we're out in the streets or at school or with our friends, because God's with us whether we're here or whether we're out and about, and our language and the way we talk should be the exact same. So I'm excited to kind of cover this last topic with you as we talk about anger and savage anger. Now, I want to give you a definition. I've given you a different definition each time of the word savage, if you maybe aren't familiar. But the first thing we'll check out is right here, savage, of an animal or force of nature, fierce, violent, and uncontrolled. Well, like I said, today we are talking about how anger can make someone savage. And when I think of examples of things that actually are savage when angry, I think of this. Anybody know why maybe I think of that? Or is this just one of those random Aaron things? You're oh, Aaron, you always come up with something weird. Let me explain a little bit. Actually, I'll explain through a video. Check this video out. Has anybody been in a situation like that with a goose before? All right, you need to live a little if you haven't, because I have. But I want to pause there before I tell you my story about being attacked by geese multiple times. Isn't that laugh just really contagious when the guy's I wish I had a laugh like that. I really want one like that someday. Anyways, side note, for me, when I think of savage anger, I think of geese or a goose because I've been attacked by geese many times. I went to school at UW Green Bay, and I went there to get an education degree and a Spanish degree. So if you habla some español, let's talk afterwards. It'd be great. But anyways, I went to Green Bay, and around the campus there is woods, trails, and it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And I was a big runner back then. So I would run on these trails, and I would come across on the trail, the first time ever, there's a goose right there, here's the trail. And I'd be I'm pretty fast. It's gonna run away, right? As I get closer to it. So I do kind of one of these, where you run kind of on the side of the trail and it's there. Well, it takes off after me and does this packing ahead thing. And I literally am sprinting, and it was my fastest mile I've ever ran. I'm I guess I gotta get geese behind me more often. Well, anyways, this happened, and I'm all right, it's a one-time experience. Well, literally every time I'd run on this trail, that goose was right there. And depending on how I was feeling that day, determined whether or not I was going to pass it. Now, if I was feeling kind of tired, just not really into it, I'd do one of these. Oh, you're there today? I guess I'm going back home. I just wasn't willing to take the risk of getting attacked by this goose. Now, this was a weird experience for me personally. And in these experiences we saw up here where these geese are actually attacking people in these situations, I think of these geese as fierce and savage because they don't care about the consequences when it's angry as it's chasing giant humans, right? Humans, it's chasing humans away. Seriously, geese are chasing humans? It chooses to take the risk of being savage to protect something that is maybe vulnerable and maybe needs protecting, because I think what it's protecting is its babies, its nest. But it's willing to attack a human, I'm way bigger than it, to protect it. Well, Jesus does this actually in a very similar way as this goose. He does it in a pretty epic way. What happens is Jesus, back in the day, he would walk around and he came to this temple. And he'd have all these followers with him that followed right alongside of him. And as he walks into the temple, or a temple back then would maybe just be a church, but he walks into this church and basically, I think he starts with one of these. Have you ever seen this look before? I think maybe your mom's done it before, or your dad. Does anybody, like when you get really angry, like you bite your cheeks or your tongue? I think that's what's going on with Jesus. He walks in and he sees and he's just like, I think he's starting to shake a little bit. Well, all of a sudden he sees these people at this table and they're selling birds. They're selling birds. That's kind of weird, right? But they're selling birds there. And they're selling cattle, and they're selling like cows, and they're selling livestock. And Jesus is starting to get frustrated about this. He sees what's going on. People are coming up, buying things, leaving, and he is getting ticked. And then like on this table, he starts seeing like money changing happening, because back in the day, this was a spot where people would maybe come and visit. So this spot, people were exchanging monies from other countries, and Jesus is seeing what's going on, and they're exchanging in the church. So Jesus does one of these. He grabs the table and flips it and drops the tablecloth. It says he also makes a whip. A whip? Jesus with a whip? Like, that's scary to me. Like, Jesus with a whip throwing tables, and he says this line to the people there. He says this line. He says, "Get these things out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a marketplace." Then his disciples, or the people following him, remembered this prophecy or this like prediction before Jesus even came from the scriptures, that passion for God's house will consume the Messiah, or the person that Jesus came to be. He says that to them. Jesus flips over tables, makes a whip, and chases some of God's followers. These people that were in there were God followers. They were Christians, not Christians, but they were followers of God at that time. And they were attacking something that Jesus wanted to protect, like a mama goose. Jesus wanted to protect something, and what he was wanting to protect was the church, God's ways, his people. Jesus in this situation is savage because he knows what he does is greater than what others think of him. Jesus is savage because he knows what he does is greater than what others think of him, especially in that moment. He doesn't care what the people think of him as he chases them out of this temple or this church, because he knows that what the temple should be for, and he knows his anger is just and right. I want you to think about yourself. Have you been in that position before? Have you gotten angry because you wanted to protect something? That can maybe be like a friend you wanted to protect, or a family member, or maybe it's just even yourself, or a belief, or your rights, or your position on something. You want to protect this thing or them because someone or something is taking advantage of them. Like for myself, I think we've all done this. But personally, when I was thinking about this, I think the times I want to protect things is like with my family, or specifically, like I was thinking about my sister. Like when people like maybe talk bad about my sister, said something about my sister, I'm ready. I'm ready to battle. I'm ready to be angry. Is anybody there with me? Like if someone talks bad about your family or your siblings, you're ready to battle. Yeah. Okay. Well, to be savage like Jesus, we can use things, or we can use our anger to protect the things we're passionate about. For you, what is that thing? What is it that you want to passionately protect through your anger? What are the things that God gets angry about that you should get angry about too? Like I said, for me, it was like my sister. If someone would say something about my sister, and like, my sister's like old. She's not like a little sister. She's like 23. You know, like she's not vulnerable anymore. She's a strong, smart. She's a black belt. Like she can handle herself. Like this is my sister here. Take a look. So, but like for some reason, if something threatened her, or she was like being taken advantage of, or somebody was just like demanding things from her, I would be ready to fight, I was angry. Is anybody else there with me? Like if something like that happened to a sibling or a family member, you would be ready to like go. Yeah, all right, I think we're on the same page. Well, personally, I want to step in for her battles or the things maybe she would be struggling with. Kind of like what this kid does with his sister, his sister is actually the wrestler. Check it out. That's awesome, isn't it? Like a little kid is coming up pushing like who's ever wrestling his sister because he wants to protect her. He wants to protect her. For you, what are things you feel you want to protect when they get attacked? A few of mine, again, that come to mind for me personally is, again, my family, like my wife, my money. Like if someone came in and attacked my money, my time, my stuff, my reputation, my looks, my influence, my beliefs, my values, even like student life. If someone came in and tried to attack what we do here on Wednesdays, I'd be ready. I'd get angry. Yet, as we think about that a bit, is that right? Is that right to be angry about those things? Are all these things worth getting angry over if something threatens them? In all honesty, probably not. Would Jesus get angry about all those things I just listed? Probably not. Some of them, yeah, but all of them, no. So in order for me to know whether my anger is just or right, I need to know what God thinks is just and right. So to figure that out, I think there's one big question you need to ask yourself as you're dealing with things that make you angry. And the question is this: would Jesus be mad about this? Would Jesus be mad about this? For example, you get a spill on your shirt. Would Jesus be mad about that? Okay. Would Jesus be mad about that? All right, well, I got to tell you a little story. Today, who's like sick of the mosquitoes? I'm like super sick of them. I get in my car and there's like 4 of them all around and there's like one hovering here and I do like this to get it. Blood everywhere. It was so gross and I was mad. But was that like something worth getting mad about or being angry about? No. Would Jesus get angry about that? No. How about someone else spilled something on your shirt? Is that worth getting angry about? Probably not. You lost your game, your sporting event. Worth getting angry about? Probably not. Someone losing money, is that worth getting angry about? Probably not. Parents grounding you, is that worth getting like righteously angry about? Probably not. How about this one? Someone getting bullied around you, would Jesus get angry about that? Probably. Someone getting gossiped about? Probably. Someone getting outcasted or uninvited to participate maybe in a church or whatever it may be, would Jesus be mad about that? Probably. Someone being threatened or beaten. Would Jesus get mad about that? Probably. Someone abused verbally. Yeah. Someone being taken advantage of. Yeah. Someone not letting them learn about God or come and worship in a place. Yeah, I think Jesus would get angry about a lot of those things. How do we know those things, though? How do we know the things that Jesus would get angry about? It's through the Bible, actually. It's what we see God put importance on through Scripture and through the lives of Jesus. So if you're unsure on certain things, on some of those things maybe I even mentioned, you can ask a pastor or maybe like a Christian you respect, one of your leaders. You could pray. You could pray to see if God could give you an answer of what's okay and what's worth getting angry about. You could try and look it up in the Bible. When you get mad about the same things as Jesus, you start to have righteous, savage anger. So I want to ask you, what's something you have righteous, savage anger over? In the story with Jesus, the story where he flips the tables, he didn't just get angry at people for selling things, actually. There's actually more to the story. You got to kind of know a little bit of a background, because would Jesus get mad about people exchanging money and like doing these things? I think so. I think that's worth getting angry about in a church, but there's more to it. Back then, there was this church, and this church specifically on this part of the church, this was like a special part of the church that was meant for guests. It was meant for people that were just visiting. Like I said, foreigners would come in, people who have never heard about God before. They were to come to this part of the church. And as they would come to this part of the church, this is a chance for them to learn about God, to pray to God, to worship Him. Well, instead of them being able to do that, these Christians or followers of God decided to make the church, or that portion of the church, a place where they would sell things, exchange money. That is something I think Jesus would get really upset about. The fact that someone is now not letting somebody new come in to learn about God, to worship God, to connect with God, because they want to sell things. I think that is righteous anger from Jesus. The church that Jesus went into was actually the special part that was specifically for guests. And those people that did that, sold things there, they were Christians. They were people who know what's right and wrong with God. Well, Jesus is savage because his anger in that situation is something that's going to help people know God and protect people in that situation. Now, as we're getting close to wrapping up here, I want you to think, what's something that angers you that is going to help you protect people or something vulnerable? Maybe it's like the time where there's specific people you see are treated less than. You see people that are just treated like poorly, like people are always bashing this specific people group or this specific group of friends. They're always bashing it. And it makes you really mad, so you do something about it. Maybe it's people who are plain old rude to others. It makes you angry to see other people rude to others, so you want to do something about it. Maybe it's people who have disrespected the church. Maybe they disrespect you for going to church or disrespect where you go. And they're church people that are doing it to you. Maybe it's when you see poor people or people that are just struggling to find food or have clothing. It makes you angry to see that people are suffering like that. Maybe you can't stand how one who says they are a Christian acts outside of the church or outside of Wednesdays or Sundays. If any of these things make you angry, how can you act on them this week? How can you act on them this week? I want you to think about that for a second, but a couple quick things I want to clarify before you think of your action. First off, Jesus, right? Jesus was angry, but he didn't use violence. He was angry, but he didn't use violence. Jesus was more upset with so-called God followers at the time. He was mad at people that were Christians or Jewish followers because they actually knew better. Non-Christians, they wouldn't know better. Jesus knew for sure that what he was angry about because he's God. He knows what's right and what's wrong. So he knows exactly what's right and wrong and what's right to be angry about. Where for us, we might not know. We might think that what someone's doing is wrong, but maybe it's not. So knowing those things, for us to act on something that angers us, things need to be done with caution. So maybe for you, your action this week on something that angers you, maybe it starts with you just praying about it. You're praying to God to say, God, hey, this situation really upsets me. Help me figure out how to deal with it. Or maybe you then try to find out what you are seeing. You try to find out if it's actually wrong. Like you talk with a pastor, you talk with your leader, you talk with people you see to find out if what you're actually seeing is wrong. Because maybe you're wrong. Next, you maybe check with the person that you're seeing something happen with. You check with them and you see, you try to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Like, let's say somebody is breaking the church walls, right? They're just kicking it. That probably upset you, right? You'd probably do something about it, and it's just wrong. You know it's wrong, so you would say something. But maybe you say, hey, why are you doing that? And they're like, well, Aaron actually told me to build a new wall here. Who knows? Maybe they have a reason. And then finally, if you still can't understand why they're doing what they're doing, bring it up to somebody. Bring it up to, to me, to a pastor, to a teacher. Maybe it's a police officer even, because what you're seeing angers you so much. We all experience things that anger us. And sometimes that anger is something that is used to protect the church like Jesus did. So as you leave today, I want you to be aware of things that maybe anger you and see if maybe you are experiencing anger because you're actually supposed to do something about it. You're experiencing anger about something because maybe you need to do something about it. So I'm going to pray that God makes that evident to us. If we're angry about something that is right with God, I pray that we're able to do something about it. So if you want to be reminded of that and to think about that this week, you can pray along with me. Hey God, we just saw how you got angry about a certain situation. I pray that as we deal with times where we get angry, I pray that you help us figure out if it's right or wrong or how we should handle the situation. But God, I pray sometimes when we experience that anger, that sometimes that's you saying you want us to do something about it. So help us figure out whether or not we should and how we go about to doing something. In your name we pray. Amen.